YouTube. Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biotensegrity Party number 28, Anatomy and Movement, today with a focus on hand and grip. And we're really delighted because Dr. Niall Galloway has agreed to do a 5-part series on anatomy and movement, which we'll be doing over the next few months. Our first installment is hand and grip, and so we're just very excited about that. I'm here in Washington, D.C. I'm Susan Lowell de Solorzano, and my co-hosts are here with me, Chris Marita Clancy in Deep Cove. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Susan. Hi, everyone.
And Graham Scarr in Nottingham, deepest Nottingham.
Hi, Susan. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Graham. And then Neil is coming to us, Dr. Niall Galloway is coming to us from the area of Emory University, where he's a surgeon and professor, and that's in Atlanta, Georgia. Hi, Neil.
Hello there.
And then Jean-Claude Guimberteau is our special guest today, and he's coming from Pessac.
Well,
yes. Yes, in
the
Bordeaux.
big city in the world, near Bordeaux, yes.
Yes, in Bordeaux. Jean-Claude, welcome.
Welcome, everybody.
And we have our wonderful volunteers with us. Hey, Mariana.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, everybody.
And Lisa will be here soon.
I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Lisa, there you are. All right. And hi, Steve. Good to see you. And we've got all of you, so many people, new people. It's wonderful. So we're going to ask Neil to open with the toast.
Thank you very much. We all want to get a better grip on biotensegrity. So today it's hand and grip. What a good place to start. A very short toast. May you be well and stay well forever.
Oh,
Happy both.
cheers.
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 Wonderful. Thank you. Before we get started, we're going to hear a little about our sponsors that we're so grateful for supporting us for months now. We started at the end of March, and Handspring was our first sponsor, and they've been with us all that time. And then we've had additional sponsors coming in. So Graham, maybe you could say something about that?
Yes, thanks, Susan. The BiotensegriTea Party is an all-volunteer production of the Stephen M. Levin Biotensegrity Archive, and made possible through the generous support of our wonderful sponsors, starting with Handspring Publishing in East Lothian, Scotland, producers of highly accessible, easily applied research-based material for movement and manual therapy professionals. They are offering a generous discount coupon to all those on the Biotensegrity Archive mailing list and our Zoom participants. Handspring also produce a weekly newsletter entitled Springboard, which you can join from their website, handspringpublishing.com, and which provides details of their weekly webinar series, Move to Learn, hosted by Elizabeth Larkham. Well, I think it's actually bi-weekly. We're also generously supported by Chris Clancy's educational organisation, Embodied Biotensegrity in Vancouver, British Columbia. And for those of you looking to learn more about biotensegrity, Chris's programs are an excellent resource. Biotensegrity Trailblazers, for example, meets twice a month. There's also a book club. The Biotensegrity Party is also sponsored by Artifact Pro of Madrid, Spain, where you can find some brilliantly constructed anatomical tensegrity models. Artifact Pro also offers a generous discount coupon to our viewers on the Biotensegrity Archive mailing list and to our Zoom participants. We're also kindly supported by the British Fascia Symposium in the UK, which not only organises their event every 2 years, but also several other exciting programmes which are coming up soon. So thank you to all our sponsors. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you so much. And I don't want to say too much, but one thing I just really appreciate Neil and Jean-Claude, both of you, for being here and doing this today. Both surgeons, just as Steve Levin is. Surgeons have a unique perspective on biotensegrity that those of us who haven't had our fingers and toes inside of living bodies cannot have. So we really look forward to this discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Neil. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It is an absolute delight to be talking with Jean-Claude today, and we would love to use him as a guide to stroll under the skin, and he's going to show us some wonderful things. And without more ado, I'd like to invite Jean-Claude to start his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Neil. It was a difficult topic for me because to introduce really biotensegrity in the grasping, in the grip, it was new. And so I have tried to present how I have asked Stephen Levine many years ago, after my exploration of the sliding tissue around the tendon. It was really a sort of adventure for me, and biotensegrity model has been an answer. And I want to share with you this kind of adventure. So I share the screen, and I try to, yes. Is it okay?
Beautiful, beautiful.
Okay. So when you are a young student,
flexor muscles in the middle third
when
of the
you are a
anterior
young
portion.
student, you are looking at anatomy at the level of the hand, and you see many things. You see ligaments, you see vessels, you see tendon, you see sheaths, you see tunnels, and you try to understand. You know that you have flexor tendon, you know that you have sheaths, but in fact, at the end of your academic cursus, you know things, but really it's theory. In fact, you know nothing concerning the practice, and you know nothing concerning the reality of anatomy. But you have your license to be a surgeon, and you know, and so you have to begin to make surgery. So I did it, and but little by little, some questions appear, and these questions were concerning this movement of a pianist. Sorry. Oh, I am sorry.
It's okay. I think we need to share the screen again.
Well, I don't know what happened.
Do you see the green button at the bottom?
Yes, I try.
Yes.
I try. No. Sorry, but it's the first time.
It's fine.
Chris is here, co-host.
So
yes, he is a co-host. Can you see the bottom of your screen?
Can I jump in here? Mariana, would you like to go off into a meeting room with Jean-Claude and get that fixed up?
Sure.
Try.
And then we'll get Neil and
Yes,
Susan
sure.
or Steve to talk. Yeah?
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, it's
Oh,
up,
here
it's
it
up.
is. It's fine.
Great.
Lisa, we can edit this part out for the replay maybe.
So normally it has to work. So, yes. And I was surprised, the first question I had, to look at the fingers when a pianist is playing. All these fingers are playing together, but not the same note, with not the same force. They are completely independent. And when you are looking to the flexor tendon at the level, for example, of the carpal tunnel, they are very close. So they can be close and totally independent. This was a question for me. The second question was, when you are moving the fingers, I know that the fingers are moving inside the palm of the hand at least 3 centimeters. And you can't see this moving at the level of the skin. So there is an absorbing system. The third question was, when I am stretching the skin, removing the skin comes back to the resting position perfectly. There is never any changing. It's always coming back to the resting position in the perfect position. And so this question, very simple, have no answer. So I was making surgery, this kind of surgery, tendon transfer, vascularized tendon transfer, and I was very interested by the sliding of the tissue. Here, for example, you can see a tendon, a flexor tendon, with a sliding tissue around. So I was transferring tendon, and sometimes tendon with a skin flap to replace the skin gap at the level of the finger. So I was every day interested by this kind of problem, trying to solve, to find a solution. And to understand what I was doing, I had the necessity to use first a microscope and then after an endoscope. And an endoscope is, as you can see here, is a tool that you can introduce inside the tissues, and you can look with the magnification at least 25 times, and after 2005 with HD high definition cameras. So it was a great moment for me because I was able to have good definition for what I was seeing. And so it was easier to show to my colleagues what I had seen and how we could understand. The focusing is very difficult, because the depth of the lens is very short, and very often you have thousands of drops of liquids, and you have to wash all the time. But I discover, and after maybe 30 years of surgery, I discover what is called the connective tissue for the first time. very closely, and I discover the beauty of under the skin, the beauty. But I was surprised by some shapes, very surprising shapes. I was surprised by one thing fundamental. And I say that, I have said it to Stephen a few minutes ago, connective tissue has an irregular framework. This is a basic observation. And if we don't accept that, we can't understand and give an explanation. We have to do with. So this was unexpected, totally unexpected for me. And the second is that these connective tissues, the fibers, are mobile. And the third is that this connective tissue is not only mobile, but it's fractalized. So I was entering in a new world for me. It was a new world because I was prepared for rational things and I was confronted with, how can I say, non-regular things. So I decided to go on. And I did a lot of exploration during surgery. The tourniquet generally is on, so I can observe easily things without the blood extravasation. And so I was able to observe this tissue. And this tissue, the connective tissue, is made of
Close to find spaces,
fibers.
I found tissue
Fibers
continuity.
everywhere.
Where I was searching for layers,
Sorry.
I definitely found
Everywhere, around the tendon, inside the tendon, with a blood supply, a perfect blood supply, all around the muscle, all around the tendon, all around the nerves, you have this kind of connective tissue. So for me, it was in the both. It was surprising to see that, but I was prepared by the notion of connective tissue. Connective tissue, for me, was a tissue connecting tendon and the bone, or tendon and the muscle. But in fact, the role of connective tissue is much more important, because this tissue around the tendon, you have the tendon here, and the tissue around the tendon, which is called epitendon or paratendon. This tissue is made of fibers. Fibers. Only fibers everywhere. So you need to have the conclusion. You can't do differently. The gliding tissue is made of fibers. And these fibers are in an irregular pattern. And the result is efficiency. So irregular pattern of fibers is able to give efficiency. It's not usual to have this kind of conclusion, but you are confronted with this reality. Another observation is the sliding. Look here. You have a tendon
moving without the surrounding
you have a
peripheral
tendon
tissue being influenced. And yet
here
the vascular supply
in white.
moving smoothly without rupture.
And look, we stop, we go forward. Around the tendon, when the tendon is moving, here, for example, look, the tendon is moving here, but the tissue around the tendon are not moving. So between the tendon and the peripheral tissue, there is an absorbing system. Secondly, all the vessels around the tendon are not working in a linear way. Look here. Look, some vessels are going speeder than the others. And we are in a homogeneous matter. How can we explain the fact that you have different speeds in a homogeneous matter? We have to solve this problem. And this problem has been really, for me, a sort of mandatory work. How can we explain that? I did a lot of exploration. I did a lot of attempt to understand, and you are obliged to conclude that there is a non-linear way to explain. We can't explain with linearity. It's not possible. Everything is non-linear. So this non-linearity has been for me during 20 years a sort of everyday attempt to explain. Every day I have tried to find the sequence of the shooting able to give me the right solution.
Move the endoscope towards the flexor tendons at the wrist. We are
around the flexor tendon, when you use the endoscope, as I said, you see only fibers and this kind of sparkling mirror around, but only fibers. Look here. What we called peritendon or paratendon or epitendon is made only of fibers. Small fibers around 10 microns, 20 microns, but only fibers. Not only around the tendon, but inside the tendon. You have the fascicles. Between the fascicles, you have tiny fibers. And at all the level around the tendon, you have fibers. And one day, looking to these fibers, I was able to see that all these fibers here, during the movement, are moving. The bigger, the smaller, and the smaller. All of them are moving during the movement. So these fibers are able to move, and they move in a sort of non-expected way. So I decide again to make an exploration at all the levels around the tendon. And for example, look here. You have a tendon here. Here you have fat. Between you have the sliding tissue. So look, it seemed to be nothing. You could say that, but it's a connective tissue, it's almost nothing. We can destroy it. But in fact, look what it is. It is a world of fibers, a world of fibers. And this world of fibers has a sense. It's not nothing. We can't anymore neglect it as our former colleagues have done, or former anatomists. They have neglected this kind of tissue because it's apparently fragile, and it seemed to be only a connection, but it's more than that. It's more. And this fibrillar network, first, is always oriented in the direction of the imposed constraint, always, but not in a linear way. It's in a non-linear way. That means that all the fibers are not all of them in the same direction. No, that's wrong. Some are in the direction of the constraint directly, but the others are in the direction making able fibers to be in the most efficient way to give the best response to the constraint, but in a non-linear way. They are not like soldiers in a parade, not at all, not at all. And this movement, this non-linear movement, and when I say, I have said to Stephen, and I say to Stephen because Stephen is there, I say, Stephen, you have and we have to take in account this observation. This is non-linear. And this non-linearity is obtained because fibers are in a permanent ballet. They can lengthen, they can divide, and they can slide. Look here, in this sequence, I present it very often because it's for me, it's a basic observation for the non-linearity. You have 3 fibers and 4 barrels. You are going to see this fiber is going to slide along the second one. This one is going to divide, and this one at the same time is going to lengthen. So when you have seen this kind of sequence, you begin to understand how is working the sliding system. Look, the dividing and lengthening. So the response to the constraint, the response to the force imposed, the solution is there because this kind of movement is over billions and billions of fibers. These 3 movements, which in fact are globally with the same mechanical behavior, there is a lengthening and return to the initial position because there is a pre-tension inside the body. Very often you can find elastin rings along the fiber. As you can see here, elastin rings. And you have to take in account this kind of observation in the biotensegrity model. Sometimes you have elastin rings, sometimes not. You have the sliding too here. They can slide. And you have to imagine the depolymerization and the repolymerization in an instant. So we have to understand the chemistry of these movements, how are working all the molecules of collagen. Look here, you have a sliding up, ching. Here too, look at the fiber. She's sliding along the other one. And this is very important, this sequence. We will be back on this video because you can observe that the movement is with a sort of uncertainty. This movement of the fiber is not certain. There is a sort of hesitation, waiting for the force waiting for the best adaptation. We could come back on this problem. There is a division, and the division in 2 or 3 or 4 fibers. Able, look here, for example, you have 2 fibers. And then you have 4 fibers, giving a mechanical response to the force imposed. This is the dynamic fractalization. And in the tensegrity model, we have to introduce that. So, another kind, division. And this is, I think, very important for biotensegrity, because you have the diffusion of the forces in 3 directions, 3 different directions in the 3 dimension of space. And sometimes some fibers remain fixed. They don't move. So this kind of observation has to be introduced in the model of the biotensegrity. Because the result of all these 3 movements is to give adaptability, elasticity, suppleness without any rupture. Because during the movement, you need the blood supply, you need the nerve information, and you need that without rupture. So it's not my model, but I think that the sliding system is organized like I presented here. That means the 3 dimension in the 3 dimension of space. And you can find on this animation here, you can find what we see down under the skin. We see fibers, we see intercrossing of fibers, we see irregularity, and we see also microvolumes, because the intercrossing of all these fibers in the 3 dimensions of space produce microvolumes in the 3 dimensions. And these microvolumes are explaining what we see during endoscopic observation. I call that microvacuole, but you see that everywhere in the body, and all the surgeons in the world see this kind of observation. This is very common, but without any explanation. But it's a very constant. Look here. This is what we call microvolumes or microvacuoles, which is the result of the intercrossing in the 3 dimensions. Here, the microvolumes are full of glycoaminoglycan able to give the sliding. So you see that this concept of the fibrillar network is a concept able to explain the movement, the continuity, the volume of the body, and very often, as we have seen at the level of the skin, for example, not today, but many conferences, at the level of the skin, you observe that the skin is made of polyhedrons, irregular polyhedrons. And here, under the skin, at the level of the connective tissue, you find again polyhedral shapes, irregular polyhedral shapes. But it's always the same shape, polyhedral, 4, 5, 6 sides, but always polyhedral. filled by glycoaminoglycan or filled by only cells. And these polyhedron, these microvolumes full of glycoaminoglycan are able to change of pressure, keeping the volume, but to change of pressure. They are moving during the movement. They are able to adapt to any kind of constraint. Look here. So it's a sort of absorbing system, as I said before. And this potential, dynamic potential, is essential to explain the movement, for example, the suppleness. So this way of thinking is really coherent, because after you can explain how the liquids are inside the body. The liquids are not water, they are fluids, but they are under pressure, keeping a volume stable, and they communicate with a continuous flux, keeping the pressure. So at the end, I can explain for me, and I try to share with many people, the movement. The movement is obtained by the billions of movement of fibers in the 3 dimension of space without rupture and able to give response to all the forces coming from the 3 dimension and at all the scale. So it's why I insist on the fact that we have to introduce irregularity. We have to introduce the movement of the fibers. We have to introduce the density of the glycoaminoglycan. We have to introduce many things inside the biotensegrity model to have finally a model corresponding to the reality of anatomy. And I try to explain to the students and surgeons that the sliding of the flexor tendon is explained, as you can see here. The tendon are sliding in a sliding tissue and not in a virtual space. The notion of virtual space is an obsolete notion coming from the past century, but it's wrong. And I have tried, and at that moment, I have tried to contact Stephen Levine. Stephen, do you remember? Maybe. I have tried to understand, because I was, how can I say, I have read Donald Lindbergh, but Donald Lindbergh was thinking of that at the level of the cell. But it was very interesting for me because it was a sort of polyhedral organization, and it was close from what I was able to see. But Stephen introduced this kind of thinking in the body, in all the body, at all the level. It's why I was one of his fan from the beginning. But we have to introduce and to improve the basic model, introducing movement of the fibers. Little by little, we have to understand that this model is not a linear model with vectors of forces. No, it's not only vectors, it's a share of the forces. All of these fibers, they share the forces. They don't transmit all the forces, they share. It's why, well, maybe we can speak, Neil, or what do you want? Neil?
I am absolutely thrilled to bits with that presentation. I have enjoyed it enormously. I have two straightforward questions for you. The first one is, have you taken a biopsy of this tissue that you call fibers?
Yes, yes, we did it. We did it. I can explain
when you look under the microscope,
another.
what do you find?
Sorry? Yes, it's made of collagen 1. Collagen 1 and the glycoaminoglycan are add with collagen 3 sometimes, 4 sometimes. So it's made of collagen and glycoaminoglycan, that's mean glycoproteins.
Let me say this. We know that we're made mainly of water. You know,
Yes.
most of the body is made of water. You have described the space in which you're looking as very wet, that constantly having to clean the end of the lens. Our images look to be wet. The mirrors, these thin diaphanous structures. Were you able to listen to Gerald Pollack's talk about bound water?
Well,
and is there a possibility, do you think, that some of what we're observing here is the behavior of bound water that we're not going to see on any of these histological studies?
well, it's surprising to see that very few studies have been made concerning all this tissue. Very few, because all the research has been focused on the cell. During 50 years, from the Second World War until now, everything is, all the research is on the cytoplasm, on the cytoskeleton, on the DNA, on the cell. But the world around the cell, almost nothing, almost nothing. And so you are not able to find any paper, a recent one, concerning this extracellular world. You have some studies before the Second World War made by colleagues from Finland, but it was just the beginning. But a lot of research has to be done concerning all this tissue, concerning the histology, concerning the organization. I am sure that the collagen is not the same in all the parts of the body. Certainly it's not the same when you are looking to the collagen at the level of the face and the collagen at the level of the foot. I am sure that it's different. Different in type of collagen, maybe 1, but maybe 5, maybe 6, maybe, and different at the level of the glycoaminoglycan. Sure, but well, you are a surgeon, I am a surgeon, and it's not our job to do that. But we have to encourage young generation to do this kind of work. So, okay.
Can I invite Steve to pitch in here?
Yes, of course.
Am I here? Yes, I am. I'm delighted to join you. And, you know, you're talking about actually something we have addressed for years and has been part of our initial concept. And if I can, I'd like to share my screen because I pulled up this thing just now from Wikipedia that exactly addresses the problem you described. So I'm going to, if I may, if you want to continue desktop. Share. All right, this is Delaunay triangulations, which is well known. As you can see here is exactly what you're describing, but you can't see very well are these also circles around it. You follow it up here, and there are points in the center, and they collect up into what is Voronoi diagram, which has to do with a mathematical center of points, and it's an energy concept. And here is your sliding one right here, the Delaunay transformations, where it suddenly shifts because of an angle change in the system that shows exactly what you are describing.
Yes, okay, Stefan. But the problem for Voronoi design and Delaunay triangulation, it is that it's on the plane. It's not in 3 dimensions.
Oh yeah, no, Delaunay is in 3 dimensions. This is a 3-dimensional view.
I am not sure.
Yes, the Voronoi is a plane. The Delaunay is, yeah, but only because of the restricts of it. Delaunay is 3 dimensions. That's, that's what the whole thing is about. It's a 3-dimensional concept. As you can see here, there are 100 points in a plane, but it comes out into triangulation in 3 dimensions.
Yes.
Because where is that one with the angle that this one here is a 3-dimensional triangular thing, not a 2-dimensional. It's about 3 dimensions.
Yes, but the Delaunay triangulation is a mathematician concept.
Well, yes, I know, but what it does is put it shows what your so-called fibers are doing. I don't believe, first of all, I don't believe the fibers. I think we have a mucus substance in the tissues, and as you put stresses on it, it becomes fibers, and that's the very nature of collagen. It's in response to stress by developing fibers.
No.
I don't think there are any fibers as such. I think it's mucus, and mucus, when you put stress on mucus, it'll be fibers, or it ends up as bone, or it ends up as tension, or it ends up as a tendon. It's because it's being stressed, and it's soft matter that responds to stress.
No,
I think you can see me here. You can see
I
I pull this apart.
No,
you get the fibers.
No.
You get fibers in there that are there.
No. It's not mucus.
Well,
it's a fibrillar network. During 15 years, I have tried to explore the tissue. It's a fibrillar network.
But can you cut out one of those fibers and look at it as a fiber? It's the mucus thread.
No, it's no.
Well, you can't. There is no more fiber there. I mean, it's a mucus thread. It's not. And I've been giving the snot lecture for years. It is what we're talking about. It's not that transforms under stress. That's the way I see it. And not only that, but then that fits into, that gives history to the rest of everything, because you start with that, and it's in the hierarchic, it builds up to the tensegrity model. When you talk about that the skin goes back to its normal shape, it's because a tensegrity is a super stable structure, and you try and deform it, and you can change the form, but you let it go and it moves right back into its original shape. So it doesn't disappear, it becomes part of that original shape. Let me see, I'll get you out of stop screen share here. So if you pull on this, you get what looks like fibers, but it's really the same thing. And if you put it together, it becomes a gel again. And it depends on stress. And if you take a tensegrity and distort it and twist it as much as you can, and you let it go, it comes back to where it was, as does the skin, as does the bone, as does the rest of the tissues, does the face, you know, as does your mouth, as you move your lips. You know, it has a preferred stress point that is lowest energy point, and will always return to that. And that's the very nature of a tensegrity structure, is that the shape you see of it is its lowest energy point. So it'll always move back to there, so you can stretch it, or you can compress it, or you can try and shear it, which it doesn't do. It'll just change its shape. And then you let it go and it returns back to its lowest energy state, because it's the second law of thermodynamics. And you can't fight the second law of thermodynamics.
I have a responsibility here to step in and defend our guest.
Yes, well, I'm agreeing with him. I see everything he sees. I just have a model for it.
I would ask Jean-Claude, having observed this as you have more than 20 years ago, you started off by talking about Kant's, you know, description, and then thinking about it, and then, you know, articulating it. Is it possible, having made your first observation of these fibrillar structures, and I totally agree with you that these appear to be fibers. You called them fibers more than 20 years ago. Having now heard and seen and knowing what you know about soft tissue physics, knowing what you know about the work of Gerald Pollack and the fourth phase of water, is it at all possible that you would have chosen a different word for fibers if you were to observe this again today?
Well, this soft matter, it's why for me it's difficult, because I don't share really the same way of thinking with Stephen. I think we see the same things, but we don't have the same conclusion. It's why for me it's sometimes difficult, because how can we explain the continuity, for example? How can we explain the continuity without a continuous fibrillar network? How can we explain the design of all the micro vessels inside the body without accepting the fact that the micro vessels are incorporated inside the fibrillar network? How can we explain when you are moving your plastic toy, it's linear. It's linear. It's not non-linear. What you are doing that. All the fibers are moving in the same, all the fibers are moving in the same direction. All of them.
Understanding as we do that the fibers themselves, the collagen fibers, are intensely hydrophilic.
Yes.
Is it reasonable to imagine that each one of these fibers is coated itself with water, with bound water, and that appearance of bound water is one of the things that influences the appearance and the behavior of the fibers?
But it's not really water. It's glycosaminoglycan. It's not the same. And the covalents are different. The way the adhesion between the collagen and the glycosaminoglycan is a continuous link. There is no, it's not water inside a balloon. No, not at all. Not at all. It's a link, continuous link between glycosaminoglycan and the collagen fibers and molecules.
Could you could you help me to understand where you see water at all in your observations?
Well, Neil, when we cut, for example, with the tourniquet is on, for example, you cut the skin, you see what we call lymph, that means water, okay? What is it, in fact? It is that when you cut with your blade, you cut the tissue, you destroy the microvolumes. And so the liquids, the fluids are free.
Okay. Okay. Let me ask if you have anything else you'd like to say, Steve, before we move to questions.
No, I think we'll leave it to the questions now.
Okay. Well, as we look to this, we have some thoughts from John Sharkey about sliding and gliding, and I'm not able to quite see his photograph, his question. John, are you able to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Neil, I don't see John in the list. Are you referring maybe?
Okay, I'm sorry, there was a reference.
I think that was maybe Paul Thornley referencing John.
Yes,
there we are.
Neil, I know I was using the word of sliding, and John told me that in fact the best word could be gliding. But for a Frenchman, it's difficult to find the difference between sliding and gliding, you know. So
Yes.
little by little, I use more the gliding word than sliding, thanks to John.
Well, I, as a Scotsman, have a difficulty working out the difference between sliding and gliding also. So I'm very much in your camp. I think we do have to remember that anatomists have led us astray many, many times in the past, particularly around the spinal cord, because the anatomist, in dissecting the dead body, would find, when they opened the spinal canal, they would only find mucus. And they thought that at one time that was what the ejaculate came from. And at other times they thought it was marrow, so they called it myelo. So we have myelodysplasia as a name for spina bifida, which has nothing whatever to do with marrow, and yet we have it still today. We have to lead John, and I'm quite glad he's not here today, or we might be getting into those sorts of issues. I am still entranced by your images and the way that this continuity of support structure runs all the way through the entire system. Have you looked at the vasculature and neovascularity and how that uses the same architecture?
Oh yes, yes, yes. You can find, well, I don't think I can. Well, I present it very often. You can find the same architecture in all the tissue, I insist on this fact. From the surface of the skin, for example, how can we explain that at the level of the surface of the skin, you have polyhedral design? You have been to university as a surgeon. You have been taught, as I've been. Nobody has explained to me why we have polyhedrons at the surface of the skin. Why? And all these polyhedrons are completely different. They are irregular and they are different. no one is able to the neighbor. We're all different. Why this diversity? How can we explain this diversity? These are questions. And I can bring a sort of solution or a solution thanks to the irregular organization in the 3 dimension, thanks to the fibrillar network, because you can find fibrillar network at the level of the epidermis, dermis, inside the hypodermis, and then muscle, periosteum, bone, aponeurosis, at all the level. At all the level, it's always the same organization and a continuous organization.
We have a question or a request for clarification from Wilbert Kessick, who asks, I would say we are made of bound or contained water. Water in the body is part of the glycosaminoglycans complex, is it not? And he congratulates you on a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. No. In the body, you have a fibrillar, for me, it's my way. You have a fibrillar network in all the body, framing an architecture for all the body, from the surface of the skin to the nucleus. It's a continuous way of fibrillar way at all the scale. And at the level, at the mesoscopic level, you have one way for the gliding or sliding system. That means the intercrossing is full of glycosaminoglycan, or you have the other solution, the framework, the intercrossing framework is full of cells. And then you have an organ, or you have a gland. So the same framework is able to give sliding, suppleness, elasticity, adaptability, and in the same way is able to nest the cells to give a function. And if you continue to try to understand, look at the respiratory organization. It's made of what? It's made of fibers, alveolar, and vessels around. It's the same way as inside the body, around the tendon, around at the level of the periosteum. It's the same organization at the level of the respiratory function. It's the same way everywhere, with adaptability, with adaptation, but it's the same.
I have a question here from Graham. He asks, it has been shown that collagen fibrils are produced by fibroblasts, which align themselves and the collagen in the direction of the tensional forces, and during development produce this complex, regular, non-random pattern. What would you say to that?
Well, I am not a specialized in collagen production, but we have tried to analyze this tissue, and we have observed inside this fibrillar network cells. These cells are adipocyte and fibroblast. And around the fibroblast, you have a production of a tropocollagen, that's the collagen primitive. And these tropocollagen fibers are in many directions, not really in the direction of the constraint. But I think this kind of interpretation is wrong, because when you are observing these cells under the microscope, they are not under tension. There is no tension. The tension inside of the body has disappeared. So it's difficult to say something. Maybe they are in the direction of the constraint, but maybe not. You have not the tension.
Are you aware of any work that's been done looking at this fibrous network in the embryo or in
No.
the fetus?
Maybe Jap knows that.
Yes.
Well, I think Jap has very good ideas, and I am always happy to listen to what he say, because he has a. We are very close. In fact, we are very close, but we are different. So.
I'm struck by how similar we are too, and you know, we don't have established words for some of these structures.
Yeah.
In making your talk, you've called these same fibers and a fibrillar network, and I'm not sure that we can look under the microscope and have an answer under the microscope, because the way we prepare tissue in order to examine it under the microscope is very dehydrating and is going to change the chemistry and leave the parts.
Sure. But that, you can say it. I could say, and I say it, but all our colleagues working in labs, they don't accept this way of thinking. They don't accept, because they are sure to have the truth. And so when you say, well, but inside of a living body, it's different. No. So it's different. It's difficult to, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, it's difficult to share. And it's why we have to be, all of us, in accordance to be accepted by the scientist community. Otherwise, it will be difficult, because they observe. In fact, they observe the life through the death.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I would say, you know, I'm a bladder doctor, and I can tell you that a bladder works exactly the same way as a tendon, and that as your bladder fills, there are sheets of muscle that normally overlie one another, and the sheets separate one from another as the bladder fills. You don't stretch like a rubber band. These structures physically move in relation to one another. And it's only in the very final moments of filling your overfull bladder that you actually begin to put a force that could be described as a stretch on the urinary bladder.
And it's beginning to be painful.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Because there are at the limit of elasticity. So there is a sort of emergency signal for the body. Stop.
And so we have that behavior for the tendons, for the bladder, for the stomach, for the gut, for things that change volume. And then we have other organs like bone or the prostate gland that doesn't really have any need to accommodate change in volume. And it has a structure that is correspondingly less versatile and less.
Yes, but it's the same, for example, for the dermis compared to the epidermis. The dermis is very thick, stuffed, very few cells, only fibers, almost fibers. And certainly it's the same for the prostate, is it? Maybe. It's made of fibers.
Yes.
And, yes, and it could be different for the bone, Neil, because inside the bone, you have a fibrillar organization. You have alveolus. It's an intercrossing of fibers inside the bone. In the spongious bone is made of fibers intercrossing in the space. The same way.
Can I ask if anyone has noticed a question that I should ask that we have missed?
Neil, this is Susan talking. Here we go. I'm going to say that I was wondering about if there was some research that Steve and Jean-Claude could think of that would help to reveal or illuminate some of the aspects of their discussion. And I think also Wilbur had a comment he wanted to make. And at this point, you know, we're after the hour. While I'm interrupting, I may as well interrupt. We can get into the more party mode. People can turn their cameras on so we can all see each other. And then Neil, anytime you want, you can ask somebody to unmute. They can ask the question themselves. It's up to you. Thanks.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. Stephen, now you've got a chance to get your breath back. And I wonder whether there might be some other measures that we might use to look at the fibrillar network that might do with conduction or some other property that would allow us to explore how much of this is collagen and how much of this might be something else.
Okay, well, first of all, let's get back to the very concept that biotensegrity model is a model. It's a way of us trying to understand how this structure works. And what it does is incorporates a lot of the concepts we talked about. Whether it is the real thing, I mean, that's impossible to know. But all those things we talked about fit into the biotensegrity model that we've had from the subcellular to the organism level. So it incorporates these forces, and it's really a diagram of forces. So we're talking about what are the natural forces in nature, and the natural forces in nature, as I talk about, is if you got 2 cells or 3 cells together and trying to join together, they're going to follow Plato's laws, because that is a physics law that you can't break. And, you know, and forces between, you know, forces always travel in a straight line. So you have these concepts of geodesics. So then, you know, the whole concept was built for how do you get a bunch of cells getting together in a mass, you know, even if it doesn't make any difference, even the eggs of a frog, for instance. I got a pond back here full of frogs' eggs, and they conform to a certain arrangement. And if you pop one bubble out of them, or it's even the beer on your, the foam on your beer, if you pop one bubble or enlarge one bubble, the whole foam reassembles itself in order to accommodate it. And it has to do with laws that are built into nature, you know, that are, you know, go back to mostly the second law of thermodynamics, that is always going to seek the lowest level. So the biotensegrity thing that we propose is an attempt to put Jean-Paul's concept into a pattern. And whether it finally gets, it's to get your, what you are talking about actually fits very well into the biotensegrity model. Now, are there rough points that we have to smooth out? Probably. But most of them go back again to the laws of, that we know, second law of thermodynamics, Plato's laws. Forget about the laws relating to hard matter physics, because that does not apply. Those laws do not apply. You have to think of the laws of that apply to soft matter. We have to understand soft matter physics better than we do.
Yes,
so,
right. Yeah.
As Jean-Paul pointed out, you know, you take tissue and you look at, we don't see tissues under stress ever, because it's surgery, they're not under stress or under anesthesia. You never see, like this silly putty that I play with, all right?
Yeah.
It's soft and mushy when you hold it in your hand. You throw it on the floor and it bounces, and you go pick it up and it's soft and mushy. Was it soft and mushy when it hit the ground, or was it hard when it hit the ground? How do you know? You only know that the only time you play with it is it's soft and mushy. So we are looking at tissues that appear to us to be soft and mushy, when actually, if they get pounded on, maybe hard and elastic. We just don't know because nobody's looked at it that way. So, you know, we have to then take the model as Jean-Claude looks at and say, okay, can we fit it into anything that fits? Right now, the closest thing it fits to is the tensegrity model. That's why I see, because it certainly doesn't fit into the linear model that has been traditional biomechanics. So you only got two models out there. You got the linear mechanical model and you got the biotensegrity model. Right now, we should be working, since it certainly is not the linear model, at least we should see, can we think of taking Jean-Claude's model, what he observes, and fitting it into the biotensegrity model. From my viewpoint, it fits. And again, perfectly, I don't expect it to be perfect at this point because it's only a model.
I know. Stephen, for example, I have tried to understand, to think, is the soft tissue is isotropic or anisotropic?
Again, it depends on the stresses that you apply to it.
Yes, and depends where you are. So you can't have only one way. Let me show you something. Let me show you something. I try to find, where is my presentation? It disappeared. I try because my presentation has disappeared.
Yeah, but we're working, the body's working in a gravity field. So it adapts to it to, you know, in that way. So we have a lot of linear structures because we're adapting to responding to a gravity field. In a organism, hydra in the middle of this ocean, it's different because the forces are different. So you have to understand that they'll respond to forces differently, but it still is, how do we respond to these forces? You know, you have internal forces and external forces, and you have to get them working together.
Do you see my video?
No. Anybody see his video? No, it's not up yet, Jean-Claude.
Do you see now?
Yes, I see it.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, just some question, and it's why we have to discuss all together. Some question. Here, for example, you have the tendon. The tendon. Yes, the tendon is moving. Okay.
Yes.
The tissue around the tendon are not moving.
Yes.
So, okay. So there is an absorbing system. How can we explain that? How can we explain that?
We explain it as nesting. Yeah, we explain it as nesting tensegrity structures that fit one inside the other, and that at times can be joined and times can isolate from one another.
Okay, but we have to accept that at this level, near the tendon, the structure are under the force, the constraint, and at this level, near the skin, the forces have been completely absorbed because the skin remains stable. The skin don't move. So it's moving with rupture, with efficiency, and coming back to the resting position because there is a tissular pretension. But when we look at the tendon here, sliding or gliding area between the tendon and the aponeurosis, and then gliding area between the aponeurosis and hypodermis. And when it's moving, how can we find a Poisson? Do you know Poisson coefficient?
Yes, Poisson has nothing to do with.
Yes. How can we find
ratio? Poisson ratio doesn't exist. It actually is positive instead of negative. Yeah, I mean, it's I forget which it is, but Poisson ratio behaves differently in soft matter than it does in linear material. So you can't compare the two.
It's not negative. It's not negative. It's positive.
Well, that's right. That's nonlinear material does that. That's known about nonlinear material.
So, you know, we have many questions to solve to find really an explanation, and then we will be able to present our works to different colleagues. It's the same for fractalization. When you are looking to all this, yes, look here, for example. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know where is it. Well, fractalization, you in the model, for example, in the biotensegrity model, you don't incorporate the fractalization.
Yes, we do.
No.
It's every part of, you know, each one of these struts is a miniature, is you can miniaturize this and replace each one of these struts with a miniature one of this ad infinitum. That's fractalization.
Okay.
All
okay.
Right?
Yes. Okay.
Not only that, but you can have, you know, you can show that I can put 9 struts together and end up with 15 icosahedrons. You see, that's fractalization.
Yes.
So it is built into the model.
Okay. So maybe at that time, we have to introduce in your model, thanks to a new animation, all this biotensegrity behavior, but at all the scales in the same moment. Do you understand what I say?
It's not a problem.
Yes, but I think if we want to, how can I say, if we want to influence our colleague, we have to present something which is completely in accordance with anatomy and observation.
Well,
It's why I think we have to modify the model and to create an animation.
Well, I have no problem with that, but I, you know, when I compress this model and push down on it and squeeze it down, every one of these struts is doing the same thing at a different level. And when I pull on it, every one of the things I'm pulling on is also changing its shape and form and readapting to it. And when I let go, it will seek its least energy level, which is going back to where it was. Because that's part of the tensegrity model. And so that at any level, you can break it down to so that each one of these thin looking little wires is also a tensegrity column. It's not that this is a wire and this is a tensegrity. This is a tensegrity, this little string, as well as this pipe. It doesn't make any difference. And if I go down to the next micro level on it, you'll see the same organization, structural structural organization, not
Yes.
necessarily material organization.
Yes, but I agree, Steve. But we have to create an animation. I have tried it. I have, yes, because it's
Okay, I
it's
have no
more
objection to that.
it's more understandable. I have tried many times. Looks, I made a lot of attempts to understand how this gliding tissue is able to move. I have tried during 15 years, but the animation is something very useful and easier to understand. And I think if we want to be in accordance all together, we have to create a new animation incorporating all these elements, all these observation facts. And yes, and there is something else. There is something else which is also very interesting, is the uncertainty of the fibers. I don't thought to speak about that today, but in the model, when we create a model, we can create one model
In this
but we have to know that it's only one possibility. The field of possibility is largely open. It's not because the movement will be able to be achieved by one way, but it will be always the same way. We have to introduce uncertainty.
Okay, if you have a foam, again, go back to your beer, and you have a foam and one of the bubbles bursts or enlarges, the whole foam will reshape. But you can't tell you can't predict what each bubble is going to do. So there are lots of ways of that foam to reshape itself. But it will follow Plateau's laws. That we know. So it doesn't make any difference, take out that one bubble and the whole thing, the whole foam is going to reshape. But you can't predict which bubble is going to do what to fill in that space, because it's this randomness that you talk about, but
yes.
even that randomness is governed by laws.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
so we're talking again about what laws govern the thing that you see. The laws that govern the things you see, you're talking about foams and bubbles. But colloids are foams and colloids are soft matter, same thing as foams and bubbles. That's why
I agree absolutely with that. But maybe we could in the next year, we could try to create this and working together to create this animation.
I'm with that.
Able to explain what we have seen and what you think. We could do that.
Glad.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Yes.
I just want to clarify this, right? This is a tensegrity model, yes. But this is not a biotensegrity, right? I'm the biotensegrity model. That's me. And you can't represent all of any organism, of course, with this. This is just our departure point for understanding things about the living tissue. So I think it's an important distinction that might be getting lost in the sauce.
Yes, you are right. But I say that now we could do, we could do better.
Great. What do you have?
Right. Give us another model.
Great. Show us what does better. Because the other thing is, I will also say, you know, we use many things when we want to understand biotensegrity, right? We don't just use this. We use so many things because no one inert, non-living puzzle or model can contain all the concepts.
Yes, but nevertheless,
Yes, thank you.
nevertheless, Susan, I think that we could work together to improve the model. Otherwise, I said it before already. Otherwise, one of these days, a new model made by other people will appear, and we will be obliged to accept. So if we want to continue our research to improve the knowledge, I think we have to improve the biotensegrity model thanks to animation, thanks to what we do, digital animation. Now it's largely possible, and we can modify, we can check, we can do many things. I did it, and so for example, well, here you can have, you see, you can have this kind of interaction of fibers, and it's the reality inside the body. So we can do that all together because we don't have to be separate. We are thinking the same way, but with different manners. But we can, if we work together, we can find only one way. And then after you, me, and others, we can go on the stage and explain easily.
This
Wonderful.
is very exciting. Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So Jean-Claude, I'm so happy to hear you say that. And I want to thank all of you guys. Not that we're coming to the end yet. I think we can go on for quite a while. But Neil, what a fabulous job you've done moderating this discussion. And the fact that we can be here and I get to be watching history happen. And so do everybody on board. This is amazing to hear you guys, to hear our pioneers, people we look up to, coming to say, yes, let's work together, is very, very exciting. And one of the things I just want to add to this conversation is that what you're saying, Jean-Claude, let us create these models together, is really a follow-up about some of our pre-going live conversation when I asked you, how can we find this cohesiveness in our community? And you were talking about bringing people, the surgeons and the vets and people who can explain the mathematics together into a forum. And so that's what's emerging from this, create a model, an animation together. And also, might I put forward that we have these, I mean, the work you have done is groundbreaking, and we have these gorgeous images. And in my mind, what the biotensegrity model is doing is giving us the maths, because one of the things you said, we need to bring in the mathematicians, the people who can explain the physical laws. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, I'm not a mathematician, but where else are those mathematics going to come from? So what we're seeing when we see these things like the Delaney and the Varoni, it's like, that's the math. I don't, I'm going to repeat, I don't understand math, but one of the things that I've been bringing to the Biotensegrity Trailblazers group, we're crocheting hyperbolic planes, and we are, quote unquote, performing mathematics. So those of us who who don't get it on an intellectual academic level get to experience this in our hands. Anyways, I just wanted to share that because where is the math going to come from? And there may be more out there, but from my understanding, which is limited, what we're discovering with this model of biotensegrity and with the work that Steve is bringing forward, and Graham and Susan and Leonid, is there are maths. I might not understand the maths, but they're there. And for those of us who are math challenged, who get excited by the performing of mathematics, we're playing with bubbles, we're playing with soft matter, we're creating models. So I just am really, really happy to hear the coming together of and making plans. So let's keep going on that. Now I'm gonna.
Well, let me just add a word of thanks to Jean-Claude. You managed to offer each of us a window on the world that we do not have without you. And that window on the world offers us a set of images that are absolutely fascinating and enticing. And you've gone beyond that in your effort to understand this as well as you can by giving us these three-dimensional images, the animations that bring this whole thing to life. And we cannot underestimate how much energy you have brought to our conversations. And I'm not at all surprised that we cannot all completely agree around every detail of this, but I really do feel that we are in the same sandpit, and we are much, much closer now than we've ever been before, which is very exciting.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. I appreciate a lot because I did many conferences with my colleagues, surgeon, and very often I felt alone because all my colleagues and were in France, but it's the same in some place abroad. All my colleagues, surgeons, are technicians. Most of them, they love techniques, procedure, but they are not really interested in this kind of research on living matter. And I appreciate a lot that a surgeon give this kind of comments. For me, it's a sort of new step when I see that people looking at living matter every day agree with me and are ready to share and to go on and to try to understand a new way of thinking anatomy. That's all. We are on Vesalius knowledge for 3 centuries. Nothing had changed. Nothing. I have been taught of anatomy as my former colleagues 2 centuries ago were taught. But now it's not possible because we have technology. We are going inside the body, inside, and we see, and we can record, and we can understand, and we can repeat. So it's a new world, a technical new world.
Well, let me also, as we wind up, let me ask you to imagine that at the very beginning of your career, you knew then what you know now about how the body works. How would you have lived your life differently or practiced as a surgeon different than the way that your life was without this information?
Certainly. I remember when I was younger, I was making a lot of free transplant with large incision, destroying many sliding areas. Now it should be different. It should be different. And I encourage new surgeons to have smaller incision, to respect sliding areas, to avoid to use dissectors, to be very precautionous with tissue. Because when you damage a tissue during surgery, it will be a scarring tissue after, working less. So, but if you look to the technical evolution of surgery, young generation are using endoscopy for many kind of surgery, many kind. Now they use for to release carpal tunnel. I remember 40 years ago, we were using a large incision at the wrist. Yes. Now we are doing that with endoscopy. The incision is at least maximum 1 centimeter, maximum 1 centimeter. So we have improved, but this improvement is obtained thanks to the technology, not thanks to the surgeon, but thanks to the tool, the technology. We improve thanks to the tool.
I think the other thing I would say is that when I look at you and I look at Steve Levin, the two things that you have in common with one another is that not only are you very uncomfortable accepting things that you're told, you actively seem to seek after the sort of cognitive dissonance that medical education is full of, that you're told something and yet you see something different with your eyes and you're told, no, don't worry about that. That's just an exception. The rule is really the true thing. This seeking after resolution to some of these cognitive challenges, I think, is huge, and we don't have enough of it.
I don't know, but I think that we are really, I think we are at the beginning of a new way of thinking the human body, and the place of the human body inside nature. We are a product of the nature. We are a product and under rules of nature, not under rules made or invented by humans. You are under rules of the nature. So,
well, let me throw this open, and anybody who feels they have to chime in, please feel free to chime in.
Wilbur, hi.
Hi,
John, how are you? Oh, what a beautiful presentation. You really captured in my mind, I mean, some of the questions that have been around unanswered for a while. And I think your concept and your visualization blends in very well with the concepts around biotensegrity. I think you and Steve are very close. I have just quick comments that I want to make. I have so many things, but I just got to stick to a couple of quick comments. I think looking at both models and your concept, I think we have to go back and look at the molecular behavior of whatever the substances we want to call them that makes up our being. And I think too many times we get to the macro part, which is talking about the fibers and all of this thing, and we forget about the molecular constituents of our being.
yes.
We come from somewhere, and whether it be atoms, neutrons, neutrinos, whatever you call it, that system is what has repeated and repeated and added on to give us what we are. there is only a certain amount of minerals in the earth. We have hydrogen, oxygen, and so forth. The biological system we know in terms of the constituents that makes proteins or make glycoproteins are very consistent, and is what repeats to give us fibers, to give us collagen, to give us bone, to give us whatever you want to call it. The fact that the other element, water, comes into the system is very crucial. And water in the system, to me, comes in and collaborates with glycoproteins to create some form of a charge system. And I've been saying that for a while, that there's a charge system, and that charge system has within itself the ability to create some type of force. When you try and compress it, when Steve talks about soft matter, if you compress soft matter, it changes its constituents, because the charges with the constituents that make up that system, the hydrogen, the oxygen, the negative and the positive charges, if you bring them too close together, what happens is that there is a repulsion. I know like charges can attract, but they only attract to a certain point. The negative and the positive pole of two negative poles of a magnet pole, it's difficult to get them to stay. They'll always repel. You can put enough force to force them together, depending on the polarity, but they will always push apart. These are the basic laws of nature. And I think the beauty about the nature is that this system of water interacting with glycosaminoglycans is what creates that infinite versatility to allow the system to fractalize, to allow it to change instantaneously and infinitely without any kind of a direction to respond to the gravitational field. I don't think it could happen any other way. If we had a rigid system, it could not happen any other way. And this system, I think, is so versatile because it's built from the same common blocks that keep adding up to each other in multiples and multiples to give us what we have. We have skin. Skin is made up of the same constituents that the glycoproteins are made up of, just a different combination. And that is the beauty of this system, is that it can sort of exponentially create infinite combinations to give us stuff, and can infinitely respond to stresses from the internal and the external stresses. So we have to, I think, talk about particle physics. We need to have not just mathematicians, but we need people who understand soft matter, particle physics, to really come and explain things. Austerity behavior is because when you stretch or you try to compress the tissue, you bring the glycosaminoglycan complex too close together, so the charges repel. This is obviously nature principles of physics. You can't change those laws. So I think it's logical, the behavior of the system from a molecular basis. We have to talk to molecular biologists. We need to bring them into our argument, because they will help us to understand this. I mean, I read a lot on glycosaminoglycans. We know when you get older, your glycosaminoglycans behavior change, because chondroitin 5 and chondroitin 6 sulfates are different in their proportion, and then water absorption is different. And that's why our tissues are more fragile, because they can't absorb as much of that water to behave as a cushion. So there is so much to talk about, but thank you so much.
Yes, but there are very few universities working on soft matter, human soft matter, very few. It's surprising.
Yeah.
But more all the time. Every university I've seen that has a soft matter department that's coming up, that's being created, it involves biology, every one of them.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
the biologists may not know it, but the soft matter people do.
Well, the thing is that there's a lot of work. I mean, I have a book here that I'm reading on chemistry and biology of hyaluronic. There's a lot of work that has been done on glycoproteins and so forth. But these people have never really come into the biotensegrity field, or they've never really gone and sort of try to use it as an explanation for how this behavior of molecular substances affects how it helps to create form and to create tension. Because I said it a couple of weeks ago, I says the glycoproteins in our system do have a charge, and that charge, whether it enhances electron flow or whatever, that charge helps to form the behavior in terms of our architecture, in terms of our structure, in terms of whether we become hard when you press stuff. This is what happens. I mean, if you try to compress a liquid or compress water, you get to a point where you can't compress it anymore. Why? Why can't we compress it flat? Like I can take a piece of metal and compress it flat. I can't do that with water. It will explode. That's why you can crack rocks with water, with frozen water. That's why when ice freezes, it will break rocks, it will break pipes. It's because of the charges. You cannot get the charges together. This is the law of physics. It's as simple as that. So we have to really take that into consideration when we're talking about the body. This concept of the behavior of glycoproteins and water has a huge answer. And if we can create a model to help to depict that, it would be wonderful. But it's great that we can come to work here. Thank you guys so much. I have to go. It's a wonderful discussion. I'll try and come back if you're still here. I'm so excited. Okay, thank you.
Can I chime in for a second? Can you hear me?
Yes, and probably maybe after Carol, at some point soon, we need to do a closing toast.
Okay, I'll be very brief.
But I'm not trying to rush you at all. I just, I'm following the group here. Yeah, and we'll see what Neil has to say too. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I really love Neil's question about how would you practice differently if you were experiencing as a new graduate what you know now. And Jean-Claude understandably went to his technology has changed, because not out of appreciation for the tools that make it easier for us, but how damaging it is anytime we open up. And it reminds me of a breakfast that I had with Jean-Claude and Jaap van der Wal in Scotland several years ago. And Jean-Claude and Jaap and I were sitting together at the table, and Jean-Claude said, a videographer has come and wants to make a video of me. And he asked me, what is this fascia stuff? And we all laughed, and I said, well, he didn't do his homework, did he? And Jean-Claude shook his head no. And then I said, Jean-Claude, when do you think that all the world will know how important fascia is to our science, to our understanding of our bodies? And Jean-Claude looked up and he said, in his wonderful French accent, he said, when all the world understands that fascia is the foundation of life. Now, to me, if you know that before you go into surgery, you're going to be a very different surgeon. And I just want to say, I was a part of that moment when Jean-Claude explicated that to us at the table several years ago. So even though he talks, and specifically, I'm talking about you like you're not here still. I recognize you are, but you're talking about the technology of a little centimeter incision. In reality, think of what appreciation goes into making all those illustrations, that you're trying your best to capture how all of life, how fascia is the foundation of all of life, and how this stuff moves and so forth. So thank you.
Well, I have had a lot of fun today, and I've learned a lot. And you've got me thinking about things, particularly how your view might allow us to interpret some of Gerald Pollack's observations in a slightly different way. I am not at all surprised. You know, before this, we put together about 8 different things that we might talk about, and we haven't talked about more than 3 of them. We will return to hand and grip again, but I think this has been a very useful beginning, and I'm just so grateful that Jean-Claude's been willing to give up so much time today to explore this with us more fully. Thank you very much.
Well,
And may I say a word to Jean-Claude and I have been working at this since it's about 20 years now.
yes.
That we've been bouncing back and forth, and we keep getting close and then separate and then close and then separate, but it's an ongoing process, and we're going to get it straight. One day we'll get it all together again. But
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure, and always has been a pleasure. These 20 years have been.
For me too.
I think it's so wonderful to see this collegial, respectful, important discussion. Sometimes people think, oh, we're all in the same, with the same interest, we all have to agree. No, that's the richness comes from these places where we find we're not agreeing, and then we can dive in and see what that's made of. It's delightful.
Okay, good.
So Jean-Claude, you agreed to do the closing toast. I think we're going to do that in a minute. We're going to do the sponsors again. We're going to, thank people. But Graham, can you just thank our sponsors before we close up?
I certainly can, Susan. So, the BiotensegriTea Party is an all-volunteer production of the Stephen M. Levin Biotensegrity Archive, and made possible in part through the generous support of our wonderful sponsors. Starting with Handspring Publishing in East Lothian, Scotland, producers of highly accessible, easily applied research-based material for movement and manual therapy professionals. They are offering a generous discount coupon to all those on the Biotensegrity Archive mailing list and our Zoom participants. Handspring also produce a weekly newsletter entitled Springboard, which you can join from their website, and it provides details of their weekly webinar series, Move to Learn, hosted by Elizabeth Larkham. I'll also say that Handspring produced a book with Jean-Claude Guimberteau and Colin Armstrong on the things he's been talking about today. So if you want to follow up any more, get his book through Handspring, join the Biotensegrity Archive, and you'll get the free registration link with a discount code. We're also generously supported by Chris Clancy's educational organisation, Embodied Biotensegrity in Vancouver, British Columbia. And for those of you looking to learn more about Biotensegrity, Chris's programs are an excellent resource. The BiotensegriTea Party is also sponsored by Artifact Pro of Madrid, Spain, where you can find wonderfully constructed anatomical tensegrity models. Artifact Pro also offers a generous discount coupon to our viewers on the Biotensegrity Archive mailing list. And finally, but not last, we're also very kindly supported by the British Fascist Symposium in the UK, which not only organises their event every 2 years, but has some things planned for the near future. So thank you. Back to you, Susan.
Okay. Thanks to Lisa and Rachel and Mariana. I don't see you all there. Yes, I do. Our wonderful volunteers. The Biotensegrity Party, as Graham said, is an all volunteer production. So we really appreciate all the time you guys put in every week. It's a lot. Neil, what a great kickoff to what I think is going to be an amazing and promising series, which has as its genesis this concept of anatomy and movement, hand and grip, foot and step, jaw and feeding. We're going to be looking at so many things. And Jean-Claude, it's so kind of you to put in your time, and then to also put forth that we need to spend all together more time working on all these things. So I do thank you both so much. Thank you, Steve, for pitching in as well. Thank you to my co-hosts, Graham and Chris. And Jean-Claude, I'm going to put it over to you for the closing toast.
Yes, the closing toast. Well,
from Bordeaux. So if you have,
yes, from Bordeaux, if you
Bordeaux,
want,
then even better, right?
Yes, the wine is much better than tea. And no, what I want to say is about in the Biotensegrity team, you have a lot of people able to create this new model. I think that your team is much more organized than many others. And if there is one day a new model proposed, it will be from the Biotensegrity model and team, because you are in the, and I say to Stefan that for 20 years, this is the only way to explain the role of gravitation on the growing. And so there is no any other. So we have to work together. I propose some modification. I think it's not very too complicated to integrate them. And I would be very happy to participate to a program with you creating this model. The ball is on your side.
We're catching it, Jean-Claude. We'll get back to you for sure.
We love it. To cooperation and moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a nice
Bye.
night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Nice day.
Great session, you guys. Let me just shut off the YouTube live, and Lisa